Babe, I reckon I can't wait for the company shindig tonight. We can finally rock up together in public. This time, I don't have to cook up an excuse to leave Scarlett at home. Scarlett Vance read those words on her husband's phone, and her world came crashing down around her. 8 years of marriage. 8 years believing that Ethan was protecting her from boring company parties out of love. 8 years of being the perfect, clever, and devoted wife who'd put her own promising career on the back burner to help him chase his dreams. But in that moment, staring at the message he'd sent to Tiffany, his 24-year-old secretary, a single, brutal truth hit her like a punch to the guts. She wasn't the protected wife. She was the hidden wife. Ethan wasn't ashamed of taking her to parties. He was ashamed of her as she looked out the window of their Melbourne penthouse, watching life go on as usual down below. Scarlett made a decision that would change everything. If Ethan wanted to hide her, she would become impossible to ignore. If he thought he could replace her with some young greenhorn, he was about to find out he'd completely underestimated the woman he married. Revenge, after all, is a dish best served cold, and Scarlett had all the patience in the world to prepare the perfect feast. At the next company party, the one where Ethan would finally introduce Tiffany as his new partner, he'd be in for the shock of his life. Because Scarlett Vance, the simple woman he was so embarrassed to show off, was about to transform into the biggest, boldest fool he had ever faced. The game had begun. And this time, Scarlett was setting the rules. The discovery. The relentless summer sun was beating down on the windows of their luxury apartment in South Yarra. But Scarlett barely felt the warmth. Her dark eyes, normally bright and expressive, were fixed on the phone screen, trembling in her delicate hands. The messages she had just discovered on Ethan's phone felt like a knife twisting in her heart. Babe, I can't wait for the company shindig tonight. We can finally rock up together in public. From Tiffany, his secretary. Me too, my love. This time I don't have to cook up an excuse to leave Scarlett at home. From Ethan, the man she'd shared the last 8 years of her life with. Scarlett closed her eyes, feeling the world crumble around her. How many times had Ethan said that company parties were just boring business, that it'd be a drag for her, that he preferred to shield her from the cutthroat corporate world? How many times had she bought it, even feeling special for having such a thoughtful husband? Now it all made sense. The constant work trips, the hushed phone calls, the different perfume on his clothes, the late nights that went way beyond any business meeting. Ethan wasn't protecting her. He was hiding her. The 29-year-old woman rose slowly from the designer sofa they had picked out together. Her bare feet touched the cold, polished concrete floor as she walked to the balcony that offered a panoramic view of the city skyline. Down below, life was going on as normal. Cars honked, people hurried, and the world kept turning, as if her life hadn't just ended. Scarlett was everything any bloke could want. A law graduate from Monash University, with a specialization in corporate law from the University of Queensland, she had given up a promising career to back Ethan's dreams when he decided to expand his import business. Her beauty was natural and striking. Dark hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders. Her fair skin contrasted perfectly with her almond-shaped eyes, and her smile could light up a whole room. But more than her looks, it was her intelligence that had always captivated people. Scarlett had a sharp, strategic mind that had helped Ethan build his empire, even if he never publicly gave her credit. She pored over contracts, spotted legal loopholes, and brainstormed market expansions, all behind the scenes. Always behind the scenes. Now, looking at the city skyline, Scarlett felt a transformation happening inside her. The pain of betrayal was hardening into something else, something far more powerful. It wasn't just blind rage, it was cold determination, a thirst for justice that made her blood boil and her mind work at top speed. She went back inside and looked at every detail around her. The artwork she'd chosen, the furniture she'd lovingly picked out, the perfectly organized books in her personal library. This was her home, her life, and Ethan had trampled all over it. Her phone vibrated. It was a message from her best friend, Bethany. "Hey mate, I saw a pic on Instagram from Ethan's company party. You didn't go?" He was with some Sheila. Scarlett didn't need to see the picture to know who the woman was. Tiffany, the blonde 24-year-old Ethan had hired 6 months ago as his executive assistant. The same one who always smiled a little too much when Scarlett visited the office, who made a point of showing how close she was to Ethan's personal business. But this time would be different. Scarlett would no longer be the naive wife who stayed home while her husband carried on. She had discovered something they didn't imagine she knew. The annual Commonwealth Importers and Exporters League Gala was next week at the Plaza Hotel. The most important event on Ethan's business calendar, where he hoped to close million-dollar deals with international investors. A slow, calculated smile spread across Scarlett's lips. She knew every last detail of Ethan's business, every client, every supplier, every financial move. After all, who did they reckon organized all the documents, put together the presentations, and reviewed the contracts? She was the one truly behind the success of Ethan Imports. That night, while Ethan was working late, code for being with Tiffany, Scarlett locked herself in her home office. The walls were decorated with her diplomas and certificates, achievements she had set aside to support her husband. Now, they would be her weapons. She fired up her laptop and got to work. First, she needed to understand exactly what Ethan's strategy would be at the party. She discreetly accessed his corporate email, a password she had known for years, and began to map out every meeting, every presentation, every bigwig who would be there. Then, she started her own investigation. She called old contacts from uni, colleagues from her internship days at law firms, and suppliers she knew from the early years of her marriage. Scarlett was building her own network, preparing the ground for what was to come. The hours flew by. When Ethan finally got home at 3 in the morning, he found his wife sleeping peacefully in bed. He had no idea she had spent the entire night plotting. In the days that followed, Scarlett kept up her normal routine. She made Ethan's breakfast, asked about his day, and pretended to be interested in his stories about important meetings. But inside, she was like a chess grandmaster, planning dozens of moves ahead. She knew that revenge was a dish best served cold, and she had all the patience in the world. Ethan and Tiffany had underestimated the wrong woman. Soon, they would discover that Scarlett wasn't just a pretty face. She was a force of nature. When the night of the party arrived, Ethan's world would fall apart, and Scarlett would be there to see every single second of his humiliation. The first move of the game had begun, and she was already miles ahead. What would you do if you discovered a betrayal like this? Confront him straight away, or plot your revenge? Leave your opinion in the comments below. The plan. A week had passed since the devastating discovery, and Scarlett was a different woman. On the outside, she kept up the same routine. She woke up early, made coffee, and saw Ethan off with a kiss on the cheek. But inside, a war machine was operating at full capacity. That Tuesday morning, while Ethan was in the shower humming a song, probably thinking about Tiffany, Scarlett was in her private office, finalizing the last details of her plan. She had spent nights studying his every move, every behavioral pattern, and every weakness she could exploit. Her first move had been brilliant in its simplicity. Scarlett had sought out Olivia Reed, Melbourne's most renowned corporate event organizer. Olivia was known for her incredible contacts and absolute discretion. exactly what Scarlett needed. "Mrs. Vance," Olivia had said during their meeting at a discreet cafe in Double Bay, "I completely get it. So many women go through what you're going through, and yes, I can help you." The plan was elegant. Olivia would get Scarlett a VIP invitation to the Commonwealth Importers and Exporters League Gala, not as Ethan's wife, but as a representative of a fictitious group of international investors interested in the Aussie market. The identity would be airtight, something Olivia had already done for other clients in similar situations. But Scarlett wouldn't stop there. She had discovered something that made the whole thing even more delicious. Mark Thompson, Ethan's biggest rival in the import sector, would be at the party. Mark was a 55-year-old, polished and extremely successful man who had always shown a discreet interest in Scarlett at the few social events they had attended together in the past. Over the last few days, Scarlett had casually bumped into Mark at a few strategic spots around the city. First at a cafe where she forgot her wallet, and he graciously paid for her coffee. Then at the National Gallery of Victoria, where they had a fascinating chat about a modern art exhibition. Mark was sharp, cultured, and clearly attracted to her. "You have a unique perspective on art, Scarlett," he'd commented. "It's a bloody shame Ethan doesn't share your cultural interests." Mark's words had planted a seed. He knew Ethan well enough to know her husband didn't value her intelligence and sophistication. And now, that information would be crucial for the next steps of the plan. That afternoon, Scarlett got the call she was waiting for. It was Bethany, her best friend, who worked as a society journalist for one of Melbourne's most important magazines. "Scarlett, I got the info you asked for," Bethany said in a low voice. "Tiffany Herrera, 24, business grad from the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology. She's been at Ethan's company for 6 months. And yeah, she's going to the party as his official guest." "Official?" Scarlett repeated, feeling a pang of pain that quickly turned into fuel for her determination. "Yeah, mate. From what I hear, Ethan registered her as his business partner for the event. Apparently, he's planning to introduce her to international investors." Scarlett's blood boiled. Ethan wasn't just doing the dirty on her. He was replacing her publicly. Introducing Tiffany as if she were a fundamental part of his business, when the one who had truly built everything with him had been Scarlett. But this information only solidified her resolve. If Ethan wanted to play this way, she'd play better. That night, after Ethan left for one of his late meetings, Scarlett put the second phase of her plan into action. She called Julian Cole, one of Melbourne's most respected corporate lawyers. Julian had been her professor at uni and had kept in touch over the years. "Scarlett, what a surprise to hear from you," Julian had said, genuinely happy. "How's it all going? I still regret you left law. You were one of the brightest minds in your class." "Julian, I need your help with something a bit delicate," Scarlett had replied. "Could you meet me tomorrow? It's about a rather complex business matter." The meeting was scheduled for the next day at Julian's stylish office in the CBD. When Scarlett arrived, wearing an impeccable suit that accentuated her elegant figure and natural authority, Julian couldn't hide his admiration. "You're glowing, Scarlett. What can I do for you?" Scarlett explained her situation with the coolness of a seasoned negotiator. She didn't mention the betrayal. That would be irrelevant to the legal aspects. Instead, she focused on the facts. She wanted to understand her rights as a spouse regarding the family business, especially her unrecognized contribution to the company's growth. "Interesting," Julian murmured as he took notes. "Do you have any documentation of those contributions?" Scarlett smiled. For 8 years, she had meticulously kept copies of every contract she had reviewed, every market analysis she had prepared, and every strategy she had developed. Ethan had never known about this. He assumed she just helped a little, and then forgot everything. "I have everything documented, Julian. every email, every file, every contribution. Ethan never imagined I kept such detailed records. Julian's eyes lit up with professional interest. Scarlett, this is pure gold. With this documentation, we can prove a substantial intellectual contribution to the business. If something were to happen to your marriage, something may be about to happen, Scarlett interrupted softly. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Ethan was at a fancy restaurant with Tiffany, planning how to introduce her at the party next week. They had no idea that their every move was being carefully watched and cataloged by Scarlett. "Babe, you'll see how great it'll be," Tiffany whispered, playing with her blonde hair. "We can finally be a proper couple in public." "Yeah, my love," Ethan replied, holding her hand across the table. "After the party, I'm going to talk to Scarlett about a divorce. I can't live this lie anymore." If they had known that Scarlett had already discovered everything and was orchestrating their public destruction, they might not have been smiling with such confidence. The next morning, Scarlett woke up with a sense of power she hadn't felt in a long time. Today would be the day to begin the final phase of her plan. She put on a navy dress that brought out her eyes, applied flawless makeup, and tied her hair back in an elegant bun. When Ethan came down for coffee, he found his wife more beautiful than ever. "You look beautiful today, Scarlett," he commented. But there was a distracted edge to his voice. His mind was clearly somewhere else, or rather, with someone else. "Thank you, darling," she replied with a serene smile. "I have an important meeting today." "A meeting?" Ethan seemed surprised. It had been months since Scarlett had mentioned any professional commitments. "Yeah, I'm thinking of getting back to work. Maybe it's time to resume my career." Ethan almost choked on his coffee. The idea of Scarlett returning to the job market clearly rattled him. An independent wife would be a spanner in the works for his plans with Tiffany. "But darling, there's no need. I take care of everything. You know that." "I know, love," Scarlett replied, kissing his forehead. "But a woman needs to feel useful, don't you think?" After Ethan left for work, Scarlett allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. In a few days, at the most important party of her husband's career, she would emerge as the hurricane he never saw coming. The revenge was taking shape and would be sweeter than she ever imagined. Do you reckon Ethan and Tiffany deserve what's about to happen to them? The gala only 3 days remained until the Commonwealth Importers and Exporters League Gala, and Scarlett was finalizing the last details of her transformation. She had spent the morning at one of Melbourne's most exclusive salons, where a team of professionals worked to enhance her natural beauty to a level that was breathtaking. Her dark hair now fell in perfect waves that framed her face in a cinematic way. The makeup, applied by an artist who worked with celebrities, highlighted her almond eyes in a way that was both elegant and hypnotic. Her nails, painted a shade of red that symbolized power, completed the transformation. But the real change wasn't physical. It was internal. Scarlett had reclaimed the confidence she had abandoned during the years of her marriage. Now, when she looked in the mirror, she saw the brilliant and determined woman she had been before meeting Ethan again. Her first stop after the salon was at a boutique by renowned Australian designer Simone Evans. Scarlett had a private meeting to choose the dress she would wear to the party, a piece that needed to communicate power, elegance, and a very clear message that she was no longer the submissive wife everyone knew. "Mrs. Vance, it's a pleasure to see you again. I heard you were looking for something special." Simone greeted her with a genuine smile. "Very special," Scarlett confirmed. "I need a dress that makes an unforgettable entrance." Simone, who had dressed A-listers and international stars, immediately understood the mission. "I have exactly what you need." The dress was a masterpiece, an exclusive model in emerald green Italian silk that contrasted perfectly with Scarlett's skin. The cut was impeccable, elegant enough for the corporate world, but with a hint of sensuality that would ensure all eyes turned to her. The piece cost the equivalent of 3 employees' monthly salaries, but Scarlett didn't hesitate. After all, she had helped build the fortune she would now use for her revenge. "It's perfect," she murmured, observing herself in the mirror. "Absolutely perfect." Meanwhile, a few blocks away, Ethan was in his office trying to concentrate on work, but his mind was completely occupied with thoughts of Tiffany. He had spent the morning messaging her, planning every detail of how they would present themselves at the party. "Babe, I bought a light pink dress for the party," Tiffany had written. "Do you reckon it looks good on me?" "You look beautiful in any color, my love," Ethan had replied. "I can't wait to introduce you to everyone as my partner." What Ethan didn't know was that Scarlett had access to all these conversations. Over the past few days, she had discreetly installed monitoring software on his phone, a skill she had developed during her digital law studies. Every message, every plan, every move they made was known to her before it even happened. That afternoon, Scarlett had her last meeting with Olivia Reed to finalize the details of her fake identity for the party. Olivia had created a perfect character. Scarlett would be introduced as Scarlett Vance Reed, a representative of a consortium of European investors interested in expanding business in Australia. "All the documents are ready," Olivia explained, handing her an elegant folder. "Your business card, credentials of the fictitious company, even a professional website we created. You'll be one of the most important people at the party." "And the contacts you mentioned?" "Ah, yes. Mark Thompson has already confirmed his presence, and I discreetly let slip that a very interesting female investor would be there. He showed immediate curiosity. I also spoke with a few business journalists. They'll be there to cover the main deals, but they're always keen on new and interesting faces." Scarlett smiled. Everything was falling perfectly into place. That night, during dinner, Scarlett watched Ethan carefully. He was visibly nervous, constantly checking his phone, and seeming distracted. Clearly, the proximity of the party and the prospect of finally going public with his relationship with Tiffany made him anxious. "You seem worried, darling," Scarlett commented casually, delicately cutting the salmon on her plate. "Oh, it's just work. You know what these corporate parties are like. A lot of stress, a lot of important business." "I can imagine. Are you going alone?" For a brief moment, Ethan hesitated. Scarlett could see the internal conflict in his eyes. Part of him wanted to tell the truth, to get the lie off his chest. But another part still didn't have the guts. "Yeah, alone. You know you're not into those things." "True," Scarlett agreed, taking a sip of wine. "But sometimes I wonder if I shouldn't force myself to get more involved in your professional life. After all, we're a team, aren't we?" The irony in her voice went completely unnoticed by Ethan, who was too busy answering a message from Tiffany under the table. Later that night, after Ethan fell asleep, Scarlett locked herself in her office to do the final checks of her plan. She had created a detailed timeline of how everything would happen at the party. 7:30 p.m. Ethan and Tiffany's arrival. 8 p.m. Scarlett's arrival as a VIP guest. 8:15 p.m. First strategic contact with Mark Thompson. 8:30 p.m. Gradual approach to the business circles where Ethan would be. 9:00 p.m. The moment of revelation. Every minute was planned with military precision. Scarlett knew exactly where Ethan would be at every moment, who he would talk to, and what deals he would try to close. After all, she had organized his calendar for years. Scarlett's phone vibrated. It was a message from Bethany. "Hey mate, I got more info. Tiffany is telling all her friends she's gonna debut as Ethan's official girlfriend at the party. She even posted a pic on Instagram stories trying on dresses with the caption, 'Special night coming.'" Scarlett sighed. Tiffany's naivety was almost touching. The young woman truly believed that Ethan would leave Scarlett for her without any fallout, that she could simply step into the role of wife without any resistance. She was about to find out that she had completely underestimated the woman she was trying to replace. The next morning, Scarlett woke up with a sense of absolute calm. It was as if all the anxiety, all the pain, and all the uncertainty of the past few days had hardened into a cold, calculated determination. She prepared Ethan's breakfast for the last time, as a wife who was in the dark. Starting tomorrow, everything would be different. When he came down, he found her more radiant than ever. "G'day, love," she said, serving him coffee exactly as he liked it. "G'day, you look fantastic today." "Thanks. By the way, tomorrow night I'm going out with Bethany. Dinner and a movie. You don't mind, do you?" "Nah, of course not. Have fun." Ethan could barely hide his relief. If Scarlett was busy with her friend, he wouldn't need to invent any more excuses for coming home late after the party with Tiffany. After he left, Scarlett allowed herself a satisfied smile. Tomorrow night, Ethan would discover that he had completely underestimated the woman he married, and Tiffany would learn that some positions in life can't be won with just youth and naivety. The revenge was in its final 24 hours of preparation, and it would be devastatingly perfect. Do you reckon Ethan and Tiffany deserve what's about to happen to them? The showdown, the event hall at the Plaza Hotel, had never hosted a party as important as the annual Commonwealth Importers and Exporters League Gala. The main hall was decorated with exotic flowers, sparkling chandeliers, and a panoramic view of Melbourne that took your breath away. The most influential guests in the Australian business sector circulated, sipping French champagne and nibbling on canapés. At exactly 7:30 p.m., Ethan arrived with Tiffany on his arm. She was stunning in a light pink dress that highlighted her youth, her blonde hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders. Ethan, impeccable in his dinner suit, smiled with the confidence of a man who could finally publicly display his conquest. "Are you nervous, my love?" he whispered in Tiffany's ear as they handed their invitations to the receptionist. "A little," she admitted, squeezing his arm. "But I'm happy. I can finally be by your side as your true partner." Ethan smiled and delicately kissed her hand. "Today is our first official day as a couple, the first of many." They were received with enthusiasm by the other business people. Ethan introduced Tiffany as his new business partner and strategic consultant, titles that made the young woman beam with pride. She didn't notice the curious and slightly malicious glances from some of the wives present, seasoned women who immediately recognized the dynamic of the situation. Meanwhile, a few suburbs away, Scarlett was making the final touches to her preparation. She looked at herself in the full-length mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. The emerald green Simone Evans dress had transformed her into a modern goddess, elegant, powerful, and absolutely breathtaking. Her hair was pulled back into a sophisticated low bun, with a few strategically loose strands framing her face. The makeup was flawless, her eyes highlighted with a perfect winged eyeliner, her lips in a nude tone that emphasized the natural beauty of her mouth. Her jewelry was discreet, but extremely expensive. Diamond earrings that had been a gift from Ethan on their 3rd wedding anniversary, and a pearl necklace that had belonged to her grandmother. "Perfect," she murmured to herself, adjusting the dress one last time. "It's time to show them who I really am." At 7:45 p.m., Scarlett got into the back of the sleek black Mercedes that Olivia had rented for the occasion. The driver, discreetly instructed on the importance of punctuality, navigated the Melbourne streets with the precision of a professional pilot. During the ride, Scarlett mentally reviewed every detail of her plan. She knew exactly where Ethan would be at 8:15 p.m., at the main bar, talking with representatives from the Japanese company, Tanaka Industries, a deal he had been trying to close for months. She also knew that Tiffany would probably be by his side, smiling and nodding occasionally, clearly out of her depth in the technical discussions about international logistics and customs regulations. At 8:10 p.m., the Mercedes stopped in front of the Plaza Hotel. Scarlett took a deep breath, straightened her posture, and got out of the car with the grace of a queen. The doorman, impressed with her elegance, practically stumbled as he opened the door for her. "Good evening, madam," he stammered. "Welcome to the Plaza Hotel." "Thank you," Scarlett replied with a smile that was both gentle and powerful. She entered the hotel and headed to the lift that would take her to the party hall. In the lift mirror, she made one last adjustment to her lipstick and allowed herself a smile of anticipation. In a few minutes, the most important show of her life would begin. The lift doors opened on the party floor, and Scarlett made her entrance. The effect was immediate. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned, people whispered, wondering who the stunning woman who had just arrived was. Olivia, strategically positioned near the entrance, approached immediately. "Scarlett Vance Reed," she said, loud enough for nearby people to hear. "What a pleasure to see you. How was the flight from Brisbane?" "Excellent, thank you," Scarlett replied in perfect English, but with a slight theatrical accent that Olivia had suggested to make the identity more convincing. "I'm very excited to meet the Australian business community. I've heard wonderful things about the local market." Meanwhile, on the other side of the hall, Ethan was exactly where Scarlett had predicted, chatting animatedly with the Tanaka Industries executives. Tiffany was by his side, smiling and nodding occasionally, clearly out of her depth in the technical discussions about international logistics and customs regulations. "Mr. Miller, Hiroshi Tanaka, the regional director, was saying, we are impressed with your proposal, but we need guarantees about your company's ability to handle larger volumes." "Absolutely, Mr. Tanaka," Ethan replied with confidence. "Our infrastructure has recently been expanded, and we have strategic partnerships that allow us to—" He stopped mid-sentence. His eyes had caught a movement from the other side of the hall, a woman in a green dress who was drawing the attention of everyone around her. There was something familiar about her, something that made his heart beat faster in a way he couldn't explain. "Excuse me for a moment," he murmured, handing his card to Tanaka. "Tiffany, keep the conversation going. I'll be right back." Tiffany, confused but obedient, tried to maintain a smile as Ethan walked away, clearly distracted by something or someone. On the other side of the hall, Scarlett had been introduced to Mark Thompson exactly as planned. The businessman, looking dapper in his dinner suit, couldn't hide his admiration for the mysterious investor. "Ms. Vance Reed," Mark said, delicately kissing her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you. Olivia told me you represent a consortium interested in expanding into Australia." "That's right, Mr. Thompson. We're always on the lookout for partnerships with visionary entrepreneurs," Scarlett replied, her eyes sparkling with an intelligence that fascinated Mark. "I've heard great things about your company. Perhaps we can talk about collaboration opportunities." "That would be an honor. Allow me to introduce you to a few colleagues in the sector." As Mark guided her through the hall, Scarlett kept one eye on Ethan. She could see him approaching slowly, clearly intrigued by her presence. The plan was working perfectly. "Mark," she said softly, "isn't that Ethan Miller from Ethan Imports over there? I've heard a lot about his company." "Ah, yes. Ethan is a competitor," Mark replied with a slightly ironic smile. "A competent businessman, I must admit, although his methods are sometimes questionable." "Oh, really? Well, we recently discovered that he's been using privileged information obtained through, shall we say, unconventional sources, nothing illegal, mind you, but ethically dodgy." Scarlett feigned surprise, though she knew exactly what Mark was referring to. It was one of the strategies she herself had developed for Ethan years ago, using personal contacts to get information about bids before they went public. At the time, it had seemed smart. Now, it was another weapon in her arsenal. At that moment, Ethan finally got close enough to see the mysterious woman's face clearly. When his eyes met hers, his world stopped. It was Scarlett, his wife. But it wasn't the Scarlett he knew. This woman radiated power, confidence, a sophisticated sensuality he had never seen in her. For a moment, he was paralyzed, unable to process how his submissive, homebody wife had transformed into this goddess who commanded the attention of the entire room. "Scarlett," he whispered in disbelief, taking a step forward. "Excuse me," she replied, feigning confusion with an Oscar-worthy performance. "I think you've got me confused with someone else. I'm Scarlett Vance Reed, a representative of the Brisbane Investment Consortium." Mark watched the interaction with growing interest. "You two know each other?" She... Ethan stammered, completely baffled. "Sorry, she looks a lot like someone I know." Scarlett smiled with a calculated coolness. "Oh, how interesting. You must be Ethan Miller, from Ethan Imports. I've heard a lot about your company. Mark here was just telling me about the innovative methods you use." The word innovative carried a tone that made Ethan shiver. There was something in those eyes, his wife's eyes, that warned him something was terribly wrong. "Scarlett, what are you doing here?" he whispered, low enough for only her to hear. "I'm sorry, Mr. Miller, but you keep confusing me with someone. Perhaps we should focus on business. I heard you were trying to close a contract with Tanaka Industries." Ethan's blood ran cold. How did she know about the deal with the Japanese? It was confidential information he had only shared with one person. His eyes went back to Tiffany, who was still on the other side of the hall, trying to keep a conversation going with the Japanese executives. Suddenly, everything started to click. Scarlett knew. Somehow, his wife had discovered everything. "Mark," Scarlett continued, her voice soft as silk, but sharp as a blade. "You mentioned something about questionable methods. Could you elaborate? As an investor, I need to fully understand the ethical standards of the companies we consider doing business with." Mark, delighted with the opportunity to stick it to his competitor in front of a potential investor, smiled. "Well, there are rumors that Ethan Imports gets information about bids through, shall we say, intimate relationships with employees of public companies." Scarlett feigned shock. "Intimate relationships? What kind of relationships?" "The kind that can compromise the impartiality of certain business decisions," Mark replied, looking directly at Ethan. Ethan was turning pale. He didn't know where Mark had gotten that information, but it was dangerously close to the truth. And worse, he was being exposed in front of his own wife, who for some wicked reason was pretending to be a foreign investor. At that moment, Tiffany approached, clearly confused by Ethan's long absence. "Babe, the Japanese are asking where you went. They want to finalize the contract details." The silence that followed was deafening. Tiffany had just called Ethan Babe in front of Mark Thompson and the mysterious investor. Worse, she hadn't realized that the investor was, in fact, her lover's wife. Mark raised an eyebrow, clearly getting the picture. Scarlett maintained an expression of mild confusion, as if she didn't fully comprehend the personal drama unfolding before her. "Your secretary?" Scarlett asked, feigning innocence. She, Ethan stammered, completely baffled. "Sorry, she looks a lot like someone I know." "Actually," Tiffany said, with a naive confidence that made Scarlett feel a mix of pity and irritation. "I'm Ethan's business partner, and also, well, we're a couple." The words echoed through the group like a bomb. Mark couldn't hide a satisfied smile. He finally had concrete evidence that Ethan was using personal relationships to get ahead in his business. And Scarlett smiled. It wasn't a gentle or understanding smile. It was the grin of a predator who had finally cornered her prey. "How interesting," she said, her voice maintaining its soft tone, but carrying a coldness that made Ethan shiver. "And his wife? Does she know about this partnership?" Comment your thoughts on the final outcome. The final triumph. The triumphant rebirth. The 5 seconds of silence that followed Scarlett's question felt like an eternity. Ethan was frozen, his hands trembling slightly as he processed the magnitude of what was happening. Tiffany, still unaware of the investor's true identity, smiled with the naivety of someone who believed she had finally won her place in the sun. His wife? Tiffany laughed, a crystalline sound that cut through the air like a funeral bell. Oh, Ms. Vance Reed. That's a complicated story. Ethan is in the process of separating from his wife. She's a very simple woman. She doesn't understand anything about business, you know. She stays home, has no ambitions. She's not like us, modern and independent women. Every word of Tiffany's was like a stab to Ethan's heart, who watched in horror as his mistress destroyed any chance of getting out of this situation with dignity. Mark watched everything with the interest of someone who was witnessing the collapse of his biggest competitor. And Scarlett? Scarlett maintained her icy smile, preparing for the final blow. What an interesting perspective, Scarlett said softly. And tell me, Miss, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. Tiffany Herrera, the young woman replied with pride. I graduated in business from the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology and have been working as a strategic consultant for Ethan Imports for a few months. Strategic consultant, Scarlett repeated, savoring each word. What impressive responsibilities for someone so young. Tell me, what kind of strategies have you developed for the company? Tiffany blushed, clearly unsure how to answer. Her role in the company was basically decorative. She organized Ethan's calendar, answered phone calls, and occasionally typed up reports that other people prepared. Well, I help with the general organization of operations. General organization, Scarlett murmured, pretending to take mental notes. And the market analyses, the feasibility studies, the international contract negotiations? Tiffany's silence was more eloquent than any answer. Mark began to laugh discreetly, finally understanding that he was watching a slow-motion massacre. You know, Scarlett continued, her voice gaining a dangerous edge. It's interesting how family businesses work. A lot of the time, the true strategist behind the success is someone who works behind the scenes without public recognition. Ethan closed his eyes, knowing exactly where she was going. For example, Scarlett continued, discreetly pulling some documents from her handbag. I was reviewing some materials on Ethan Imports before our possible partnership and discovered something fascinating. Most of the company's expansion strategies, the most innovative market analyses, and even the most lucrative contracts all seem to have been developed by someone with advanced legal training, someone with a specialization in international business law. Mark leaned forward, intrigued. Ethan tried to interrupt, but Scarlett continued relentlessly. But here's the interesting part. Officially, Ethan Imports has never employed a full-time corporate lawyer. So who developed these brilliant strategies? She made a theatrical pause, allowing the question to hang in the air. Unless, she continued, a wicked smile playing on her lips. The true strategist was someone very close to Mr. Miller. Someone with intimate access to all the company's information. Someone who worked tirelessly behind the scenes without ever receiving public credit. At that moment, several people around them began to pay attention. Scarlett's voice, though soft, carried an authority that naturally attracted listeners. Are you referring to someone specific? Mark asked, clearly fascinated. I am referring, Scarlett said, her voice now filled with a coldness that made Ethan shiver, to Ethan Miller's wife, Scarlett Vance, a woman with a law degree from Monash University, with a specialization in corporate law from the University of Queensland. A woman who abandoned a promising career to back her husband's dreams. A woman who spent 8 years developing every strategy, reviewing every contract, and analyzing every market opportunity that transformed Ethan Imports from a small family business into an import empire. The silence around them was absolute. People had moved closer, drawn by the palpable tension. Ethan was as pale as a ghost, finally understanding the magnitude of what his wife had discovered, and prepared. "But you know what's most interesting?" Scarlett continued, now addressing Tiffany directly, who was beginning to look uncomfortable. "It's that this simple woman, who doesn't understand business, is, in fact, the real architect of the success you now claim as your own." Tiffany looked nervously at Ethan, seeking support, but he was petrified. Finally, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place in the young woman's mind. "Ms. Vance Reed?" Ethan finally managed to whisper. "Can we talk in private?" "Sorry, Mr. Miller, but I don't believe we have anything to discuss in private. As a potential investor, all my questions must be asked transparently." At that moment, Olivia approached the group, followed by two elegant men that Scarlett recognized from her preparations. Journalists from the Australian Financial Review, one of the country's most important business publications. "Scarlett," Olivia said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Andrew Thomas and Mr. David Restrepo from the Australian Financial Review. They're doing a special report on international investors in the country." The journalists greeted Scarlett respectfully, clearly impressed with her presence and articulation. "Ms. Vance Reed, it's a pleasure to meet you. Could we ask you some questions about your investment plans in the country?" "Of course," Scarlett replied gracefully. "But I was just discussing some ethical concerns about certain local companies with Mr. Thompson." "Ethical concerns?" Andrew Thomas asked, immediately interested. As an investigative journalist, he had a sharp nose for scandals. Mark, relishing the opportunity to stick it to his competitor in front of a potential investor, wasted no time. "We were discussing questionable practices of some companies in the sector, the use of privileged information, inappropriate personal relationships to gain competitive advantages, and," Scarlett added, her voice cutting through the air like a sword, "the misappropriation of intellectual property." The words dropped like a bomb. Ethan finally understood there was no escape. His wife hadn't just discovered the affair. She had prepared his complete and public destruction. "Intellectual property?" David Restrepo asked, his journalistic antennae fully active. "Yes," Scarlett replied, taking more documents from her handbag. "I have evidence here that certain companies have systematically appropriated the intellectual work of unrecognized collaborators, specifically spouses, who contributed significantly to the development of business strategies without receiving proper credit or compensation." She handed the documents to the journalists. "These are contracts, market analyses, and expansion strategies, all developed by an uncredited source, but which were publicly presented as original work by the company's management." Ethan tried to intervene. "Those documents are private. You can't—" "Actually," Scarlett interrupted him, her persona finally falling, "I can, because all these documents were developed by me, Scarlett Vance, your wife, the woman you just allowed your mistress to call simple and unambitious." The impact of the revelation was seismic. Tiffany turned as white as paper, finally understanding that she had spent the last few minutes insulting the wife of the man she loved, a wife who now revealed herself to be far more formidable than she ever imagined. The journalists began taking photos and notes frantically. Mark laughed openly, delighted with the spectacle. "And Ethan?" Ethan collapsed into a nearby chair, finally understanding that he had lost everything. "Gentlemen of the press," Scarlett continued, now speaking with the authority of a seasoned executive, "I have a proposal. How about an exclusive interview about female intellectual property in the business world? I have a fascinating story about how talented women are systematically erased from the successes they help build." "That would be fantastic," Andrew Thomas responded immediately. "Can we schedule it for tomorrow?" "Perfect. And I assume you would also like to investigate the ethical practices of Ethan Imports? I have extensive documentation on questionable methods of obtaining contracts. While the journalists made appointments, and Mark offered additional information about his competitor's dodgy practices, Tiffany finally found the courage to speak. You're really his wife?" Scarlett turned to her with a look that mixed pity and contempt. "I am. Or rather, I was. Because after tonight, I reckon our marriage has definitely come to an end. I didn't know you were smart? Capable? Powerful? No, darling. You believed the version Ethan presented of me, the simple wife who stays home doing nothing. Did you ever wonder how a mediocre man like Ethan managed to build a business empire all by himself?" Tiffany couldn't respond. Tears began to stream down her face as the magnitude of her naivety became clear. Scarlett turned to Ethan, who remained silent, destroyed. "As for you, my dear ex-husband, I hope you enjoyed your last party as the owner of Ethan Imports, because starting tomorrow, when my lawyers file for divorce, you will find out exactly what percentage of the company legally belongs to me." She paused, allowing the words to sink in. "You see, for 8 years, I meticulously documented every contribution I made to the company, every strategy, every analysis, every contract. And according to the law, a spouse is entitled to compensation for intellectual contributions to a family business." Ethan's face lost all remaining color. "By the way," Scarlett continued with a smile that was pure venom, "Mark, I believe we discussed a possible partnership between your company and my future independent venture." "That would be an honor, Scarlett," Mark replied, kissing her hand with genuine admiration. "A woman with your intelligence and experience would be a valuable partner." Scarlett turned one last time to Ethan and Tiffany. "Revenge," she said softly, "is truly a dish best served cold, and you two have just been served." With that, she took Mark's arm and walked away, leaving behind the wreckage of the life she had built with Ethan and Tiffany's naive dreams. Behind her, she could hear the sound of cameras photographing the destroyed couple and the voices of journalists asking increasingly aggressive questions. Scarlett Vance had died that night. In her place, a stronger, smarter, and definitely more dangerous woman was born, and her empire was just beginning. The party continued around them, but for Ethan and Tiffany, the music had stopped forever. The triumphant rebirth 6 months later, the morning sun bathed the executive office on the top floor of Collins Tower, one of Melbourne's most prestigious buildings. Scarlett Vance Reed, the name Scarlett had adopted professionally after the divorce, delicately adjusted her coffee cup as she reviewed the financial reports of her new company. Vance Reed Strategic Consulting. 6 months. Only 6 months had passed since that transformative night at the Plaza Hotel, and Scarlett had built an empire that rivaled anything Ethan had ever dreamed of achieving. The secretary's phone rang in the office next door. "Ms. Vance Reed, Mr. Mark Thompson is here for the 10 o'clock meeting," announced Sophia, her executive assistant, an experienced and efficient woman in her 40s, a far cry from the decorative secretaries other executives preferred. "You can send him in, Sophia. And please, ask her to cancel my schedule after lunch. Mark has an interview for CNN International at 2 in the afternoon." Scarlett smiled as she remembered how she got here. The public humiliation of Ethan that night had been just the first move of a much more complex and satisfying chess game. Mark entered the office, looking as sharp as ever. But now there was something in his eyes that Scarlett recognized perfectly. Genuine admiration and a touch of reverence. He was no longer the powerful businessman courting a potential investor. He was an equal partner, recognizing an equal. "G'day, Scarlett," he said, delicately kissing her hand. "The third quarter numbers are bloody impressive. Our joint venture has exceeded all projections." "G'day, Mark. Please sit down. We have a lot to discuss about the expansion into New Zealand." As he settled into the Italian leather armchair, a piece of furniture she had chosen herself, To match the minimalist and powerful decor of her office, Scarlett allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The joint venture between Vance Reed Strategic and Mark's companies had become one of the most profitable partnerships in the Australian international trade sector. But the real pleasure didn't just come from the financial success. It came from the poetic justice of her rise, being built on the rubble of Ethan's arrogance. "Before we begin," Mark said, taking a magazine from his executive briefcase, "did you see the cover of the Australian Financial Review this week?" Scarlett smiled. How could she not have seen it? Her photo occupied the entire cover of the country's most important business magazine, accompanied by the headline, "Scarlett Vance Reed, the strategic mind that revolutionized Australian international trade." The 8-page story told the official tale of her career, a brilliant lawyer specializing in international business law who had decided to start her own company after years of working discreetly as a consultant. The article highlighted her impeccable education, her innovative strategic vision, and her almost supernatural ability to identify market opportunities before competitors. Of course, the article didn't mention Ethan directly. It didn't need to. Anyone in the Australian business sector knew exactly where the experience and knowledge that now made Scarlett Vance Reed one of the most sought-after consultants in the country came from. "It's an excellent article," Scarlett commented modestly, "though I reckon it might have exaggerated a bit in some parts." "Exaggerated?" Mark laughed. "Scarlett, in 6 months you have built a company that already bills more per quarter than some traditional companies bill per year, transformed 3 family companies into market leaders, and developed international expansion strategies that are being studied at universities. If there is exaggeration, it's out of modesty." It was true. After that fateful night, Scarlett had channeled all her suppressed energy and intelligence into building something genuinely her own. Every client she won, every successful strategy she implemented, and every $1-million contract she closed was a silent declaration of her true worth. And the clients came in droves. Business people who had known her work behind the scenes at Ethan Imports could finally hire the mind behind the strategies they so admired directly. International executives who had been impressed by market analyses developed by Ethan's team discovered that they could work directly with the true author. Scarlett's phone vibrated discreetly. A message from Bethany, her best friend, and now the director of communications for her company. "Hey mate, you need to see this. I just got a call from Forbes Australia. They want to include you on the list of the 30 most influential businesswomen in the country. And there's more. CNN Australia wants to do a documentary about women who have turned personal failures into spectacular business successes." Scarlett typed quickly. "Schedule the interviews. And Bethany, thanks for always having my back." "Is it good news?" Mark asked. Noticing her smile, "There's always good news when you control your own narrative," Scarlett replied philosophically. "But let's talk business. How are the negotiations with the New Zealand group?" While they discussed expansion details and market strategies, Scarlett couldn't help but have a flashback to those dark days 6 months ago when she discovered the betrayal and felt as if her world had collapsed. What a naive woman she had been, thinking that her life depended on Ethan. What a terrible mistake she had made by diminishing her own dreams to support his. What precious time she had lost, being the perfect wife for a man who didn't even value her enough to introduce her publicly. But maybe all of that had been necessary. Maybe she needed to go through that humiliation to rediscover her own strength. Maybe she needed to be underestimated to learn to never underestimate herself again. The intercom interrupted her thoughts. "Ms. Vance Reed, Ms. Olivia Reed is on the line. She says it's about the launch event for your foundation." "Thanks, Sophia. Tell her I'll call her back in an hour." Ah, the foundation. That had been another project born from that traumatic night. The Scarlett Vance Reed Foundation for Female Empowerment had already helped more than 200 women launch their own businesses. The focus was specific: women who had sacrificed their careers for marriages or relationships and now wanted to rebuild their professional lives. Every story that reached the foundation echoed her own experience. Lawyers who became housewives, engineers who abandoned projects to support husbands, and doctors who paused specialties to raise children and then discovered that their husbands had moved on to younger companions. Scarlett had turned her pain into purpose, her humiliation into strength for other women. And nothing satisfied her more than receiving calls from businesswomen who had rebuilt their lives with the help of the foundation. "Scarlett," Mark said, interrupting her thoughts, "can I ask a personal question?" "Of course. Do you have any news of him? Your ex-husband?" Scarlett paused, considering the question. Yes, she had news. How could she not? In the business city of Melbourne, circles were small and gossip traveled fast. Ethan had tried to save his company after the scandal, but the combination of media exposure, the loss of important contracts, and the divorce lawsuit, where Scarlett had legally proven her intellectual contribution to the business, had been devastating. Ethan Imports was forced to declare bankruptcy 3 months after that fateful night. He now worked as a sales manager at a mid-sized company, a position that represented a dramatic fall from his former status as a successful businessman. People in the sector knew his story. They knew that the empire he had built had actually been built by his ex-wife. They knew he had traded a brilliant partner for a youthful fling. And Tiffany, poor Tiffany, had learned in the cruelest way possible that being the other woman rarely ends well. Ethan, desperate and humiliated, had taken out his frustrations on the young woman he considered responsible for his downfall. The relationship ended in just 6 weeks, leaving Tiffany unemployed, disgraced, and with a ruined professional reputation. She currently worked at a small accounting firm in the city's suburbs, far from the glamorous world she thought she had conquered. "I have some information," Scarlett replied carefully, "but I prefer to focus on the present and the future. The past has already served its purpose." Mark nodded, acknowledging the wisdom in her words. "You are an extraordinary woman, Scarlett. To turn betrayal into triumph and humiliation into an empire is not something everyone can do. Any woman has that strength within her, Mark. Sometimes, we just need an extreme situation to discover it." The phone rang again. It was Sophia, informing her that the executives of the German company, Hoffman Industries, had arrived for the meeting about European expansion. Scarlett stood up, adjusting the blazer of a tailored suit that cost more than the monthly salary Ethan now earned. Her heels echoed on the marble as she headed to the door. "Mark, let's welcome our German guests. I have a proposal that will revolutionize our presence in the European market." As they walked down the corridor toward the main meeting room, Scarlett passed in front of the full-length mirror that decorated the wall. The woman who stared back at her was unrecognizable from the submissive and naive wife of 6 months ago. This Scarlett radiated confidence, power, and success. Her eyes shone with the sharp intelligence of someone who had learned to never underestimate her own worth again. Her smile carried the serenity of someone who had turned her greatest defeat into her greatest victory. She was no longer the wife Ethan was ashamed to present. She was the woman he could never win back. And contrary to what many people expected, Scarlett felt no bitterness or desire for additional revenge. That night at the Plaza Hotel had been enough. Ethan and Tiffany had received exactly the consequences that their choices deserved. Now, Scarlett was too busy building her own legacy to waste time looking back. As she entered the room where the German businessman rose respectfully to greet her, Scarlett Vance Reed smiled. Not a smile of revenge or superiority, but a smile of genuine satisfaction. She had proved something much more important than her ability to get even. She had proved her capacity for rebirth. And that, after all, was the sweetest triumph of all. The meeting began, and Scarlett Vance Reed, formerly Scarlett Vance, the hidden ex-wife, took her place at the head of the table as the CEO of one of the most respected consulting firms in Melbourne. The future had never looked so bright. How do you reckon Scarlett's story could inspire other women to find their own strength? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe and give this video a like to support more stories like this one.